Hello everybody, remember this game? Yeah, Rainbow Six Siege still exists, and it's still really good. So I figured I'd do a new video on it, because I tend to revisit this game pretty often, and it's one of those games that I haven't done a video on since I think the year 1 pass came out, and it's now the time for the year 3 pass. So I wanted to kind of get in, talk about the game, is it still worth playing, and most importantly, my issues with it, because I do believe there are a lot of issues, and I think that they could be fixed under certain scenarios. We'll talk all about that. So Rainbow Six Siege is still huge. There's still a massive player base for it, and that actually kind of helps alleviate some of the concern that I had originally for the game, which I expressed way back in the beta, which is that with these kind of games, you know, Rainbow Six or any Tom Clancy game, or rather any game that is a tactical shooter that does require a pretty large amount of skill, you tend to run into the issue of player skill divergence, which means that if you jump in like 2 years down the line, the people who are playing the game are going to be way good at the game, and the people who aren't playing the game and are just jumping in are going to get completely smashed for like 2 months before they kind of get the hang of it. That was, generally speaking, my biggest concern. Is this going to happen? Is there going to be a player base that dwindles over time, and that player base that is left is a really core, really strong player base, and you're not going to be able to break into the game because it's going to have a massive learning curve? That was my biggest concern. Thankfully, that has not necessarily happened. That there is the case that there is a really good core player base to the game, but you're not necessarily going to play against them that often. And when you do, you're going to know it because you're going to get destroyed. But you have such a huge breadth of players playing this game that when you first jump into the game, you first start playing it, you're going to be playing against some players that kind of know what they're doing, but not people who are godlike. Like they're not into esports necessarily. So when you jump in, you're not going to get completely destroyed, which is great, because that was, again, my biggest concern about the game. And this has been proven by the fact that I took quite a break from this game, and I came back with a friend. And the friend that I brought in has played Rainbow Six before, but she has never played Siege. And when we got into the game, you know what? She actually did pretty good. And I was a little surprised by that, because I was expecting, you know, my previous fear to come to fruition, where they were just going to get destroyed, and pretty much the entire time that we were going to be playing end up not liking the game because it's really difficult. Now, that happens every now and again. She gets outplayed, but that said, she is also pretty good at the game, enough to where she makes some awesome plays in really cool moments and wins games for us. And that is kind of the cool part about playing Siege, is the really intense moments where it's like 1-on-3 or 1-on-1, and you get those last few kills and everybody's watching and your heart's all pounding, right? That's kind of the fun part about Siege, is the tension. And when that tension is on the line, and someone who isn't super skilled at the game and hasn't been playing it for years can jump in and make moments happen, that's when you know you have something special. So Rainbow Six Siege is still a game worth playing. You should jump in and play it. If you haven't picked it up, you should go pick it up if you're into shooters, because this is a very fleshed out shooter, and it has actually quite a bit of content there, a lot of replayability. I have more concerns on that later, but we're now entering into what they call the year 3 era of this game. Essentially, each year they've done like the season pass, which gives you 8 operators, so 8 characters, and a couple other things along with that. And during that time, they typically add new maps and rebalance things. And throughout this entire year, they're going to be adding new content. And while that all sounds really good and dandy, that doesn't mean that you have to pick up the year 3 pass, which adds the operators and whatnot. In fact, we're going to jump like really deep into the game and some inner workings and how things work nowadays with it. But one thing I wanted to point out before I even get into that, because if you start thinking like, oh yeah, I remember Siege, I should go buy that. Whatever you do, do not buy the starter edition. We've learned our lesson. Holy crap, it's the worst. The starter edition, while really cheap, cannot be upgraded to any other edition of the game. And what it does is it limits the amount of like in-game currency you're getting to unlock things. And everything to unlock is way more expensive than it is if you just get the standard version. And that's not good. That's not good at all. So I would suggest getting either the standard edition, the gold edition, or the complete edition. Do not get the starter edition. It is not worth it. And if you're not sure if you'll like the game, only get the standard edition. If you think you'll really like it, get the gold edition. If you know that you'll be playing a lot of it, get the complete edition. That's just the easiest way to kind of lay that all out there. But now that I've put that PSA out there for you guys, it's time to actually kind of talk about how the game is functioning at the moment. Because when the game first came out, there were not a lot of operators in the game, which are like these characters that you play as, and there were not a lot of maps. And now there are quite a few operators and quite a few different maps. So if you're a new player coming in, the biggest challenge for you is not going to be the shooting aspect of it. That's going to be actually something really easy to get down, especially if you've played shooters before. I mean, it is a slower shooter. If you're like me, who comes from a arena shooter background like Quake and Unreal Tournament and stuff like that, it takes a little getting used to, but once you kind of get into the groove of things, you'll be fine. The biggest problem is going to be learning the maps. There are some of these maps, I just have no idea how certain parts of it connect together. Like, I can remember where certain objectives are. I remember what they look like in the rooms and what all the entrances to those rooms are, but I don't remember how the heck to get to those rooms. And that goes for all of the new maps that have been added since I last played. Outside of that, when I start thinking about things, it's like all of the classic maps, I know my way around them, you know, like the house, for instance, which is like one of the first maps that was added in the game. It was the first map that was shown back when they first debuted the game at like an E3. And I know everything about that map. I know the ins and the outs. It's actually my favorite map in the game, even though a lot of people don't like it because it is very small. But I know that map. I don't know any of the new maps, and that's the unfortunate thing, is I don't really ever know where people are going to come from, and I'm constantly learning about that kind of thing. So as a new player, you should not be concerned about your skill when it comes to the shooting mechanics, or your skill when it comes to your aim, or anything like that. It's going to boil down to, are you familiar with the maps? Once you get that down, then you can kind of start worrying about your shooting and getting better with aiming and quicker movement, and, you know, how to move around the map without making too much noise, and how to distract and all of this other stuff. That will come naturally over time. The maps are going to be the hardest thing for you to learn as a new player. But since they added all of these new characters to the game, they've added a ton of new guns. And these guns all behave differently. They feel different. They have different recoil patterns. The upgrades that you can get for these guns make the guns feel way different, so on and so forth. Like, there's just so many different options you have available to you in this game when it comes to what guns you're using. Whereas, you know, you look at like a game like Overwatch. If you play Tracer, you're only ever going to have her two little pistols. That's just all you're ever going to have. If you play Fairy, you're only going to have rockets. The characters in this game do have multiple gun options, and you can kind of choose what gun is best for which situation for you. That will change, obviously, depending on various factors. Like, do you feel like there is going to be a lot of close combat and you're going to use a shotgun? You know, then you can use that shotgun. And do you feel like there is not going to necessarily be a lot of close combat, but you're going to be wandering around and sneaking up behind people? Then the shotgun might be a good idea. You know, there's different reasons to use different guns in this game beyond the simple fact that some guns just, they feel different. And like, I'm really good with SMGs in this game for whatever reason. SMGs and rifles. I suck with the LMGs and the shotguns. I just cannot shoot with those things. They do not feel good to me. But when it comes to the SMGs and the rifles, I feel like those are my guns, so I tend to gravitate to those. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to ever use a shotgun. I use shotguns in very specific situations. So it's like you have so many different gun options available to you that you always feel like the game can adapt to how you're playing, and you can adapt to the tools that you have at your disposal. On top of that, then you have all these new characters that have all of these crazy abilities. You know, the one that I've been using recently on defense, I used to use Mute, and he could put down these like disruptors, which disrupt like any kind of electronics, including drones or breach charges on walls. So you can get really creative with how you use that character. And people who first play Mute will oftentimes start looking at certain things as you put the disruptors down at the doors, because then the drones can't come into the rooms, and that's fine. That's a good way to start playing Mute. But once you start learning that, oh no, you could put these disruptors on barricaded walls, And no longer can a person like Thermite, who can get through the barricaded walls, or some of these other characters that have now been added to the game, they can't use their stuff on those walls anymore because it takes an electric device in order to do it. So if you could put a disruptor on the other side of the wall, then it kind of disrupts that. And what I'm trying to say here is, like, Mute has a really deep strategy involved with him. It's easy to learn. It's easy to pick up and be like, I put these disruptors at the doors, drones can't get in. But then you can take these disruptors and you can put them in very clever places that people wouldn't necessarily think about, and you could really disrupt the enemy teams and really thwart their plans to breach and get into certain areas, or to even distract. There's so many cool things that you can do with that character, and that's just one character. There are so many other characters. The one I've been playing recently that I was trying to say, Ella, she's got these little mines that she can throw on walls. They're little sticky mines, and when someone triggers it, they walk by, it's like a proximity mine, it will do a kind of a stun grenade thing, and the person will become disoriented. It's really hard to see, and it's really hard to shoot with that. But you could put those in really clever spots that, you know, you can use it as like an early warning system. Like, you know, they're coming through this direction, even though it's a doorway or two away from actually coming into the room. And you're like, now I know where you're coming from. Even though you killed those cameras, we can't see you. I know where you're at. And you could jump out and shoot them if you have the opportunity. Or you could just put it in really basic spots where the people are going to be checking the room. You know, they're looking left and right as they enter the room. Not a lot of new players check the doorway. So as they walk through the doorway, one of those mines can go off. Now they're stunned. They're moving slowly. You could just turn and shoot them. They're easy game. And you know they're coming through that doorway. So there's like a lot of different ways that you could play that character. And then there's all of the attacking characters that have their own thing. You know, there's characters like Valkyrie, who came in the year 1 operators, but she can put down her own cameras that she can look through and scout out while on defense. And those cameras are hard to see. So if you're an attacking player, once you get used to seeing where they are, what they look like, you can kind of spot them. But until then, Valkyrie is a really good character to have because she can provide so much information in a game where information is key to survival. And that's just a few characters to name a few, right? Like, there are so many other characters in this game that change how the game is played, and you have to adapt to those characters. I think that's a really unique idea within this game. Is it's rare to have a game where there's so many different characters that you have to adapt to. Overwatch comes to mind because Overwatch has that same idea. You know, if the enemy team has a Reinhardt or 2 Reinhardts or 2 Reinhardts and a Winston, you're going to start looking at characters like Reaper to take them out, right? But if a character has a Pharah, you know, you're going to think of different strategies. You're not going to bring a Reaper out for that. Same goes for Siege. If they have different defenders and different attackers, you're going to try to counter them in certain ways. If you notice that they are playing a Mute where he's putting down the disruptors, you're probably not going to play a character like Twitch that relies on having this little drone that she can buzz around with. I mean, that her drone can counter Mute if the Mute is bad and is putting the disruptor down in like open areas, because the Twitch the Twitch drone can actually zap it and destroy it. But if you have a good Mute putting them down in the right spots, then you're never really having to worry about that being an issue. So you gotta like kind of consider not only what characters suit you, what guns those characters have that suit you, but also the different abilities each of these characters have and how they play with and against each other and how you can counter each other and how you can be countered. There's a lot of depth to this game that has been added over the past, 2 years because of all of this stuff that has been added. On top of that, then you have all the maps, and all these maps have different ways of playing the maps. You know, if you're defending in a certain spot, you might consider playing a very specific kind of defender on very specific maps. If you're attacking on specific maps, you might consider different attackers. You know, wide open maps like the plane, for instance, you may use Glaz, and he's like a sniper character, so you can sit outside of the plane and snipe through the windows. There's tons and tons of options available to you playing this game that add just so much depth as you're playing and so much replayability that this is why this game has survived this long. And this is why the esports of this game have actually kind of grown over time in a pretty significant way, is that there's just so much there. There's so much strategy available to you. And on top of that, they've updated the game to be a little bit more modern in the systems. You know, there's a whole cosmetic thing that you can do. You can change the way your characters look, and by adding different cosmetics like headpieces or just skins in general, like they have legendary skins. Does that sound familiar? You can change the way your characters look and kind of customize what characters you like to, well, your liking. And at the end of every match, at the very end, if you complete it, you essentially increase your chances of getting these little loot packs. They're basically a loot box that contains one item. And at the end of every match, you're getting a slightly more increased chance. And on a win, it rolls and sees if you get one. So if you, say, have a 25% chance to get a pack and you win, you'll have a 25% chance to get that pack, and then it resets back to 0. And if you're like a season pass holder for like year 3, for example, it increases the amount of percentage you get at the end of each game. So basically you're getting more packs over time, but that's not necessarily true because you could still have a 2% chance to get a pack and still get one, right? It's a 2% chance, it's low, but you could still get one. So it only makes like a minor difference in the grand scheme of things. And all of these cosmetics can be bought for actual money. And I think that's cool because if you're really wanting a specific skin on a gun, you could just go buy that skin rather than having to open loot boxes, essentially. And I really like that about what they've done with Siege. It's actually, if you look at it, if you look at the business model of this game in its entirety, it seems a little cheesy. I'll talk about that in a second. It seems a little cheesy, though. But when it comes to the cosmetics and their little like loot box things, it's actually quite fair because not only are you earning these on a fairly regular basis and able to get specific items out of them, but at the same time, you can buy any of those items right off the bat. Unlike in a game like Overwatch, where you have to keep opening crates in order to get specific stuff. Or a game like, it's not a good example, but a game like Hearthstone, where you're having to like constantly open packs to try to get a card, even though you can craft that card eventually. And that's the thing with Siege, is like you can buy any of the cosmetics with real money to get the cosmetics you want, to get the skins you want, to get the gun skins you want, to get anything out of that you want. Or you can just, you know, try to get it out of packs, or you can save up your renown, and some things can be bought with renown. So cosmetics, you could just like go buy like certain headpieces and skins and stuff, or even weapon skins you can buy with the renown, which is like the in-game currency that you get. And on top of that, there's also plenty of different options available to you when it comes down to like, what are you unlocking these with? Are you unlocking it by going and unlocking it with renown, or are you going and using that renown to buy more packs? Because you could do that too. It's basically an in-game currency that you can constantly be cycling out and trying to get more of cosmetics and stuff in the game. It's unique, it's really cool, and it's actually kind of fair. Where I think the game gets a little sleazy in its game design and its marketing and everything is the way that it's done content packs, its season passes. Because the characters to unlock, even with the standard edition of the game, are freaking expensive. You know, you're looking at essentially $20 per year. So you have all of the standard operators you can get, you know, by getting the game, by like getting the complete edition of the game, for example. You get all the standard operators and the year 1 operators. That's great. And that's like a full price game that you're paying for. But if you're looking at it from this perspective of, let's say you just buy the standard game, you don't buy a complete edition or anything, and you get the standard operators and you're unlocking things, you can go and unlock the other operators with renown at any time, but they are so prohibitively expensive that you're having to put like maybe like 10 hours in per operator, maybe even more than that, just to unlock one character, which in the grand scheme of things is fine, and that's actually gives you a huge goal to work for. But the fact that to unlock year 1 operators, it's essentially $20. To unlock year 2 operators, it's essentially $20. And if you want all of the year 3 operators this year that are coming out, you have to get the season pass, and that's $30. But that does give you like a premium account, which adds a ton of other things to it. So when it comes down to the business model, the cosmetic side of things are great, and it's really, really good. But the cost of operators seems prohibitively expensive, especially for a game that has been out for several years. It almost feels like the cost of characters should go down as far as renown is concerned over time. And we should honestly be getting a little bit more bang for our buck when we pay $20 for the operator packs. That said, I have, full disclosure, I have gotten all the characters. I've bought all of the packs for the characters, and I only have the standard edition. So yeah, I've spent essentially $50 between getting year 1 operators and the season 3 pass, and then another like $10 to get the rest of the operators, because the pass comes with some of the currency that you need in order to buy things. Essentially like the currency you buy with real money. So it is, I've basically paid like for a full price game all over again just to upgrade my game to a game that is complete. And something feels kind of sleazy about that. And that's something that they can change in the future, I think. And even if this isn't a concern to you, if you're like, money's not the concern, I'm not even going to bother playing all these crazy operators. I'm just going to play the base game, then that's great. And you shouldn't actually worry about any of this. It's just the minor concern of like how much of the markup is happening here. How much extra money are they making off of us? It seems fair to pay $20 for all these characters at the end, right? Like that's a lot of development time that goes into the game, balancing and doing the maps and stuff. But it kind of seems a bit high. It feels like going to Disneyland and trying to buy lunch for like $20. And you're like, I feel like I can go to In-N-Out Burger just outside of Disneyland and pay $10 and get a better meal than paying $20 and getting like a really sad like sandwich from Disneyland. That's kind of what it feels like is happening, even though I know the money is going to a good spot. And obviously I have no problem giving them the money because the game is good enough for that. But that's enough of the business talk about this, because at the end of the day, none of that matters unless the game is good. And as a matter of fact, the game is really good and it is worth playing. And I wouldn't care about giving them any of that money if at any point we're going through and the shooting wasn't fun or the game felt unbalanced. I mean, my biggest issue with the game, gameplay-wise, is the netcode. There's times where, and this has been an issue since the beginning, where on the player's screen, so say an attacking player is coming in through a doorway and you're the defending player in the room. So the attacking player, what they see is that they step into the doorway, they peek, and they see for a second, they see you. Now, the problem is that information has to go from them to the server back to you. So essentially there's a delay there. So they tend to see you before you see them, because not only does that information have to go from them to the server to you, it also has to go from you to the server back to them. And that delay can cause like sometimes a 1 or 2 second lag time in when you actually see, and 2 seconds on the thick end, when you actually see them versus when they see you. And sometimes you'll get killed within a split second of their head popping up, and then you watch the kill cam, and on their screen they turn the corner, they sit there for a second, they realize you're there, they aim, and then they shoot, and you're like, that's not what happened on my screen. That's my, like, if I'm going to complain about anything with this game, it's that the netcode in that regard feels like it could be improved quite a bit. And this brings me into kind of my final thing to talk about Siege. Like, this game is good. Everybody knows this game is good. You should pick up this game. You should play this game, period. Right? That's, at the end of the day, that's what I'm trying to say. This game is still worthwhile. This game is still a game that you should be playing, especially if you're into shooters of any kind. That said, I think it's time for them to move on. What do I mean by that? I think it's time for them to move on to a second game, to a sequel to Siege, because this game is still beautiful, still runs well. The modeling for characters in game is a little wonky, and it looks a little weird, but they can improve that. But the game is solid all around. But is it time for them to move on and start making a new game? And maybe they've already been doing that. So I'm going to let you in on a little bit of how development works. So when you release a game and the game is now a live service, such as Siege, even things like Overwatch is now a live service. The game is out there. The development time is more focused on putting new content out there rather than, or new content and managing the old content rather than developing a new game. And the difference there is a live ops team, which is what a team is called when they're managing a game that is as a service now, is a different kind of team and requires different talent and different people than a development team for a new game. I believe that Siege has been managed by a live ops team for essentially a while now, since probably at the end of the first year. And that means that the studio probably has all these developers available to them that they didn't want to like get rid of. You know, some of those people leave the game and go on to work with new studios because, you know, live ops just isn't their thing. They would much rather go and work on a new game and develop something from the ground up. But I wonder how many of those have stuck around for the simple fact that there could very well be a new game in the works. I mean, think about it. We're in year 3 of Siege. The game is obviously a huge success, has made them a ton of money. What have they got to lose to make a new game? And you might say, well, they would lose like the player base. It fractures the player base. Well, not necessarily. Think of how many people are playing this game that they could just be like, oh, you have Siege, you are currently playing. Either you have the year 3 pass or you've put any kind of money into this game. Here, now you have the beta for this game. You're like, it essentially just transitions them into a better version of Siege, like a Siege 2. They don't need to make any huge improvements on the game. They just need to improve some things, make more things destructible, make the engine run better, give you, similar characters. They don't have to come up with new characters. They can use ones from this game, kind of like a best of, and then go from there and add new characters as we go, or old characters. Like I said, upgrade the engine, make sure that the models in game look a lot better. The gun models look great, but the character models look pretty poopy. Fix all that stuff. Give us a new game, a second game, a game that is more modern, a game that was built from the ground up with the idea of cosmetics in mind, not necessarily what they've done, which is kind of tacked it on once that started becoming a popular thing. Improve the netcode, improve the shooting even more, and give us a game that feels new and fresh and way, way, way better, even though this game is great. I think that is a huge option for them right now. It is a really nice available option. And I wouldn't doubt, this is the important thing, I wouldn't doubt that that's what they've been doing over the past couple of years. And I wouldn't doubt that we would hear something about this new game in the next year or two, because I think that is going to be a very big determining factor for Ubisoft, They're making a ton of money on Siege, don't get me wrong. They're constantly selling this game still. They're still making money hand over fist on, selling these year passes and these cosmetics. This is making them a lot of money. But from what I know about the Tom Clancy's teams, like the people who work on like Rainbow Six and stuff, they're not just going to sit around and just do live ops on a game that's been out. They're also going to want to see what's next and what they can do next and how can they improve this, and maybe even build a game from the ground up that has more of a focus on the esports side of things, because it's been doing really well as far as the esports side of things for Siege. So why not make better spectating tools and maybe even better team management and stuff within the game, and clan management. And like, for example, the ranked mode in Siege right now is still labeled beta. They're still testing the ranked mode. They need a much better way of doing that, I feel, and giving us a ranked mode that, feels fleshed out and has a lot of reward to it, and maybe even awards like cosmetic items at the end of every season. Like, there's a lot that they can still do there. And I'm really excited to see if indeed they are working on a new game, because that would be great. So my conclusion is that you should be playing Siege. Even if you don't own the game, go pick up at least the standard edition and jump in and play, because this is the best shooter on the market when it comes to shooting. The shooting mechanics, the way the game plays, everything, it is the best shooter out there. And you might, disagree and say some other games feel better, and that comes down to personal preference, but like the shooting mechanics of this game are the best mechanical shooting out there. It's just the way that the guns feel, the way they sound, the way they behave, the way you can customize them and get things feeling the way they should in a multiplayer experience that is constantly being updated with new content. Like when it comes to all of those criteria, this game is fantastic and is definitely worth picking up and playing. You should be playing Siege. It's a very, very solid experience that, for the most part, will kind of give you an experience that is different than everything else out there, but is still fun to play. It's still unique and is still worth all of your time when you jump into it. And you don't really get that a lot. You're getting a lot of clones of certain games. You're not necessarily getting a lot of kind of unique experiences. And this game nails it. You know, when it boils down to it, this game nails it, and you should definitely pick it up and play it. But my caveat is play with a friend if you can. Get a friend together and play with them. You know, playing with a friend that I've brought into this game. When I played solo, I really enjoyed this game, but playing with her has been really fun because you can laugh at people when they make mistakes, and you can laugh at each other when you make mistakes. You can accidentally shoot each other sometimes, and that's funny. And it's just like with any other multiplayer game. The game gets exponentially more fun when you have somebody who is there with you playing, especially, you know, in a tactical game, having someone to play tactically with you and someone you can communicate makes a big difference. If you can find several friends to play with, even better. But find a person to play with, pick up the game, play with them, and really just enjoy your time with it. This is an experience that you cannot give up on. You have a finite amount of time with Siege before something new comes along. And I think that getting into the game now is the best time to have gotten into the game because there's just so much content there. You're not having to wait for anything to come out. And honestly, you know, what do you got to lose? You pay a small fee for the standard edition. Maybe you put 20 hours into it. It's totally worth it, right? Like that's a pretty good investment for, you know, time spent, in my opinion. But let me know what you think about Siege, and have you been playing it? Have you considered picking it back up? Have you played any of the year 3 stuff, even though the new operators aren't out? Are you like jumping back in and kind of seeing all the changes that they've made and the balance changes and new characters and whatnot? Have you not picked up the game, and are you considering picking it up? Like, this is all important things to discuss, you know? You may even find people in the comments that are looking to play and looking for people to play with. And I think that is really cool because we have the coolest community, and you guys can easily get together and pretty much make whatever experience that you want out of it because you guys are awesome, and you're not going to find many douchebags, you know, trying to jump in and play with you in our community. And I think that's a really good way to source new players, at least players for you to play with. But with that being said, I'm going to go continue playing Siege because it's that much fun. And while doing this video and editing it, I'm just like getting the itch to go back and play, especially with my friend here, because it's just so much fun dying and doing stupid things, and winning and losing can be fun even when it's frustrating sometimes. But with that, we shall see you guys next time.